Hi guys, just gone 4:30 here in London, and if you've made it this far, congratulations for staying awake. It has been a very slow paced day, not much news to report on from the markets. President's Day out in the States, so understandably volume going to be considerably lower, and it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow once the main players sort of come back into the markets. In terms of what has happened today, not too much. The dollar index at the time of speaking, we're talking up a quarter of a percent, not even a quarter, so 15%, 0.15, sorry. You can see here the dollar, we did push lower, albeit only to come back through. Here we go, slow the time frame down. We broke through the low of the day, had a pushback where that eventually found resistance, but then really over the last sort of 60 minutes the dollar has been weakening a tad, so it'll be interesting to see what happens into the close. You can see here euro pushing back higher, but nothing really news related that has come out, and similar for the pound. We're pushing lower around sort of 145, 130. I'm going to lower this to a 15-minute as well. You can see the pound also push through, and likewise with the euro, we've now pushed above what was that area of support. So quite choppy, slow-paced markets today. The market definitely is looking more for what's going to happen later on in the week. I think that's for certain. If we have a look at the Aussie dollar as well, you can see when that dollar was strengthening, the pivot here held quite well, but since the last hour or so, we have been moving higher, and dollar yen, obviously these markets will be to a different way, dollar strength to the upside. But you can see here, I guess if you're interested in perhaps seeing this market continue lower, you definitely want to be having this trend line on here, which you can see we found quite good support at. In terms of the move to the upside, we did finally break our one, only to come back down in what has been a pretty choppy market, as mentioned just previously. So as the dollar went up and then came back down, you've got equities actually that did the opposite reaction. So really from the afternoon, equities continued their move from the sort of end of the Asian session there to the downside, and now we're actually just sort of bouncing a bit here. S&P, we talked about it in the chat earlier, and you can see that sort of Thursday morning high, Friday low, S1 working very well as an area of support. Let's just see if that can certainly hold. And I mean, just putting this chart on a longer time frame, it is actually an important area, that low. I'm just going to mark it up. Going back, this is a whole area that we've sort of broke through to the upside. We did finish above it. So again, technical point of interest. If we do continue to push above, it could well be that the market drifts higher this week as well. Similar to the S&P finding support near the lows, you've got the Dow that, well, I guess you've got a little tiny break there of the S1, but also finding support, and the Nasdaq pretty similar. In fact, that was nicer than the Dow, similar with the S&P, and finding quite good support on what was the low of Friday before bouncing higher. So for those sticking around, obviously you're very brave, by the way, and you must have had a few coffees, but well, keeping an eye on when we come back to what were the previous lows for these markets. You've got a couple here on the Dow to be aware of where we're at now, and S&P closer to the pivot where these moves really did start. You can see the break, and it was at the same time where I think they were more led by the DAX, which you can see, I mean, it's choppy around that pivot, but you had a couple of moments, ideally, getting a few of these breaks, but again, it was quite choppy to the downside. And if you are looking for any retracements in this market, I would have this trend line drawn on there just to see how well that might be respected. Low of the day, we get a tiny break of Friday's lows there as well. So equities just finding a bit of support. Similar for the FTSE, although that did actually push through the S1 quite strongly and having quite a bad day. But you can look back at the last couple of weeks, week and a bit. We have seen a strong bounce to the upside, but definitely worth keeping an eye on if you are sticking around. Elsewhere, a couple opportunities for oil. Came back to Friday's high, acted as a good level of support, and you can see we actually did spend a bit of time around here before pushing higher. You could have a bit of a trend line perhaps going on from the previous high of the day. Let's have a quick look at that. You get a bounce through there, and then the R2 acting as good resistance on that first and second test. If we were to push on, you can see, let me just draw this line up just above 62.61 on the futures, something to keep in mind, which, you know, this would have been the Wednesday where the production output was a lot higher than expected. That's where the move perhaps really kicked on through. So definitely 62.61 is a point of interest. I think it's probably worth talking about, you know, I was just saying to Ant earlier, adverts for Bitcoin on social media, they seem to only kick in when it's above 10,000, so it seems like every other one now is buy Bitcoin, how to buy Bitcoin, etc, etc, and you can see their highest we've been since, well, January, but 11,200 where we're trading right now, so still pushing on. Technical resistance points, you can see we did find some good resistance around here in the back end of Jan, around 11,600, so it'd be interesting to see from a technical point of view what happens there, or whether we do kick on now. The Chinese New Year celebrations are over, so might see that we actually get a breakthrough perhaps, but definitely worth keeping an eye on for those Bitcoin traders there. In terms of those sticking around, can we see the dollar continue to sort of come under a bit of pressure, and maybe these euro, pound and Aussie dollar trades drift back higher, which we have seen, and especially you can see this on that Thursday where we really did kick on. So worth keeping an eye on. Aussie dollar, this area of support, previous resistance from early late last week, containing that downside for now. Any questions in the chat? Obviously I'll still be sticking around for a bit, but if not, we'll have a quick look over at the calendar for the rest of the week that you can see here. It was always going to be a quiet day with President's Day and, well, China Bank Holiday as well. Kicks on a bit more Wednesday. You can see you've got some UK, European and US data all out on that Wednesday morning and afternoon. So I think in terms of where the real market participants are going to look for sort of the market to really kick on, Wednesday is the day for that. We have got Carney speaking, I think it's 6 PM UK time. So, you know, while not usually a market mover, worth just perhaps keeping an eye on headlines. But going into the close, stocks just rebounding from their lows, and the dollar just weakening a tad from its highs. Hope you all have a good evening, and any questions, please do get them in the chat.